Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Silvates podcast. I'm really excited this week because I've got Khalid Maidan from Clinical Physio joining me. And the reason why I'm excited is because I'm genuinely a user of the web-based learning platform that they provide, and I have been using it for years. And so it's been in the back of my mind to get Khalid and Jack, or either one of them, onto the podcast to talk about sort of the kind of work that they do and how quickly it's grown and how much I've enjoyed that experience. So thank you so much for joining me today, Khalid.
Oh, Silvan, it's an absolute pleasure. And more than anything, thank you so much for inviting us on to your channel. It's fantastic to see you guys doing some great stuff too.
Thanks. And I really did mean that. I've genuinely been using your sort of web-based learning for a couple of years now since I was a band five. And to see how it's grown and the topics and the people that you have involved now has just been, I mean, it looks like it's just grown out of nowhere overnight, but I'm sure there's a lot more to it. And so I want to ask you about that soon.
Yeah.
But can you tell me sort of a bit about your background and how you came up with the idea?
Yeah, certainly. Absolutely. So I graduated as a physiotherapist in 2008. And I very specifically remember trying to go on courses, postgraduate courses, not educational university based, but just general evening seminars, weekend courses to try and learn more about musculoskeletal physiotherapy, which I suppose was always the area that I most enjoyed. And I always remember going on a couple of different courses and thinking to myself, do you know what? I'm not really sure that this is at the right level for me. This all seems very senior. It all seems very specialist. I'm just a little, junior. I only graduated less than 6 months ago. And it felt as if everything was going over my head, felt as if it was too in-depth for me. So I remember speaking to Jack, who you mentioned a second ago, who's one of my business partners, and also Phil, who's another business partner, about one day we should really do something that's more aligned for student and junior clinicians, because they will be learning or need to learn different things to someone more senior. And that's kind of where clinical physio came from, the idea of doing something which was more specific towards junior and student clinicians that they felt that they could own and they felt was at the right level for them. They felt they were confident in being able to use it because it was at the right level for them. So after doing what most junior physiotherapists do, in that they do rotations in the NHS where they do respiratory physio and orthopedics physio and neurology physio and so on and so forth, I started specializing in musculoskeletal physio, which, as I said, was probably always what I wanted to do, in 2013, and then kept going with MSK ever since. And how clinical physio kind of blended into that was that we started doing some YouTube videos around about 2015 or so. And it took quite a long while to do all of those because there was quite a lot to cover, and naturally we had to edit them all, which obviously, Sylvan, you know all about because you
I
do
know
loads
the
of
pain of
editing yourself.
editing.
So then we finally kind of got those up, and then I think it was then, when it was end of 2019, that I went back to the thought of, hang on a minute, why did I do this in the first place? It was to generate courses that people felt comfortable with and people felt was at the right level for them. So end of 2019, started doing face-to-face courses, starting to get really popular. Then COVID hit. So then we had to do things online. And I think that was it was kind of a moment that we really started growing, because people really needed us at that time, and we kind of got our heads together and thought, right, we really actually need to be able to help people now, because they don't have online resources that they want. This is what we said we were going to do the whole time. And so I suppose, thankfully, it's kind of kept growing from there. We're still going to be doing face-to-face courses start of 2022 and beyond, and we're just going to try and keep pushing it as much as we can.
Yeah, and it's amazing because I only learned about it because I work in a physiotherapy department,
Okay.
and surrounded by physios, and they were all talking about the courses and the
Oh, wow.
online learning that you were offering. And what struck me was, at least, and I know you still do that to a certain degree now, but they were free.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were. I think that was you've hit the nail on the head, that when it came to the beginning of COVID, so in the UK, March 2020 is probably when it really all kicked off. Universities were very suddenly having to work out, how are we going to do this teaching online? And obviously, as a teacher and lecturer yourself, Sylvan, you'd know that. And so we thought, right, we really need to step up. And so at the beginning, we started just doing some online tutorials on Instagram, because again, we wanted to do something free. We genuinely wanted to try and help out. Instagram was great, but it's not the most professional platform for teaching. It's all done by the camera on your phone, so it's not the biggest quality. So then we moved on to a different software where we felt, right, we're doing something more professional here. And then we started doing free stuff. And then people were saying to us, we want more, we want bigger. So I said, okay, we'll start doing something that's a proper platform that's of real quality. And we kind of went from there.
Because I remember logging into the very early days. I mean, when I discovered you was around sort of when the pandemic hit and we all locked down, and I saw like a couple of hundred people, and then every time I'd log in for another one, it was hundreds and hundreds more, to the point now where it's grown so much, and it obviously looks like this overnight success rather to me, but I know there's been a lot more work behind that. What sort of drives you to keep going and make it bigger? Because you do cover such an array of topics in terms of musculoskeletal physiotherapy. I wouldn't even say physiotherapy, it's just MSK stuff. And that's why for me, it's just been so applicable to me as an osteopath, because I don't see that distinction as much.
Thank you. That's really kind of you to say. And thank you so much for all your support that you've given us in the last 12 to 18 months. I think when you say what drives you, I think it comes back to something that isn't just applicable to physiotherapy education or osteopathy education. I think it's probably something that is relevant to everything in life, which is that the more you add value to someone else, the more valuable you become. And I think that with us, as you said, we got to the stage where we were receiving really messages that we were incredibly grateful for, where people were saying, this is really helping. We're so grateful for what you're doing. This is really good stuff. I've been telling my friends because I've been really enjoying it and they've been really enjoying it. I think when you get to that stage, you really have a duty to keep giving people that value, because they've really entered into your world. And I suppose that can be on a group or a larger basis, like we're doing with Clinical Physio. But as an osteopath, as a physiotherapist, you're giving real value to people by doing your treatment with them when they come and see you, by listening to them, by engaging with them, by appreciating what their goals are. That's how you're adding real value to everything you do. And I think that's just something that we've always maintained that we need to do in order to create something that people genuinely want and need. So hopefully that's a mantra for anyone watching, no matter what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And such a testament to the work that you all do in your team. And speaking of which, I know you've expanded your team exponentially as time has gone on. What kind of areas are you covering within the whole spectrum? Because there's so much within MSK itself.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'll come back and focus on MSK because, of course, as being an osteopath and with your audience being involved in osteopathy, that's probably what they'll relate to the most. Within physiotherapy, when someone studies a physio degree, they will need to cover neurology in terms of patients who might have had a stroke or cerebral palsy or Parkinson's disease, patients with respiratory problems, COPD, asthma, or people who have pneumonia in hospital, people who are patients within orthopedics where they've had a fracture or they've had a relevant surgery, or pediatrics, or the community, or pelvic health. So there's such a wide variety of physio to cover. And being MSK based ourselves, I suppose, as the people who started Clinical Physio. We realized that if we wanted more quality, we needed to bring people who were more quality in teaching those subjects rather than us. So yeah, we looked to bring in people who specialized in respiratory and neurology, pediatrics, to be able to offer that kind of teaching to people. So when it comes back to musculoskeletal, as I said a little bit earlier, that's probably my bag that I enjoy the most. So the kind of stuff that we do within our MSK teaching focuses around diagnosis as one point. So we do tutorials specifically on differential diagnosis in different areas of the body. Exercise prescription is naturally a big part of physiotherapy, as I know that it will be for you as an osteopath too. So we've done stuff on that. And then I suppose it comes down to different conditions, whether it be spinal surgery or shoulder treatments, or whether it be ACL injuries, or whether it be lateral hip pain, or whether it be tendinopathies. So stuff that I suppose is more topical based on different conditions. As you said, there's so much to cover, so we try and do the best we can to make sure we can try and hit every spot.
Absolutely. And as your audience has grown, where do you find inspiration to cover different topics or new material?
Sure. I think it's something that our audience do inspire us a lot with. So we'll naturally get messages from people saying, oh, can you give us something on this? Or we've been covering this, but we can't find a resource for it. Or even when you're speaking to people who have graduated, and you might say to them, what did you struggle with? And they say, oh, I found it really difficult to learn this. Right, let's try and see if we can create a quality resource on this. And so I think that's something that I suppose, again, it comes to that mantra of where can you add value, whether you're someone who's got an online platform, or where you're an osteopath sitting in front of a patient who has whatever symptoms they have. Where you can add value can hopefully shape things for you. And if it means that you can go in the direction that you know you're going to be confident that it's going to work because someone wants it, someone needs it, then happy days.
Yeah. And you mentioned a couple of things earlier. You talked about the rotations that you normally do as a physiotherapy student, and that's definitely something that you wouldn't do as an osteopath in training. And I've been a bit more exposed to it because I work along physiotherapists in the NHS now. And so that's been really interesting to understand how that's developed and how that influences and contributes to your learning, and then how you deliver your treatments as well. And that, I think for me, that's been one of the most interesting things, is because I've not been exposed as much in the same way to sort of respiratory. And so watching some of the webinars on respiratory has been really interesting for me, just not as a practitioner, but just as a general understanding basis.
Sure.
And there was another thing that you mentioned earlier. You said, you really felt that there was this need from a junior physiotherapist. And for those people who aren't familiar, a junior physiotherapist would be like a band 5 equivalent. Is that right?
Spot on.
Yeah. Or like from a student perspective. And I mean, I've been a couple of years graduate and I still watch them. I still watch your videos.
That's very kind.
And so I appreciate that sort of the target that you're probably looking at, but I think it's so applicable to even people who have been in practice for a while, because you forget things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very kind. You're probably not the first person who said that to us. And it is naturally hard to get the balance between the two, because I mean, even in osteopathy, if you're a first year osteopathy student or you're qualified 2 years, you're still within a junior type spectrum, aren't you? And the learning that you will do will vary greatly between first year osteopath, 2 years qualified osteopath, or perhaps beyond, but we need to try and work out something that equates to everyone. Going back to your to your question about different areas of physio and things like that, the idea is that you, certainly in UK universities, you study and understand practice in all areas: MSK, neurology, respiratory, orthopedics. And I think one of the key reasons is that even working in a musculoskeletal environment like yourself, you never know when someone's going to come in who is seen as an MSK patient, but they've got Parkinson's disease, or they're an MSK patient and their foot's really swollen, it's really red, and you ask them about their past medical history and they say, oh, they've got cardiovascular disease, and you think, right, that's probably one reason that it's red and swollen. It's probably not because they've had a fracture there. So I suppose, as you said the word understanding, Sylvan, and I think that makes total sense, that having an understanding of a couple of different things in all those areas can help bring everything together, even if you're not I'm not a specialist in neurology or respiratory, but having a little bit of an understanding in those areas helps me within my musculoskeletal practice. So you will find that people, as you said, will study different areas, even if they think that in the future they might want to specialize in one particular area.
Absolutely. And it's such a reflection on how different and how both different and similar, training in physiotherapy and osteopathy is. And we'll talk a bit more about that on your podcast, and I'm excited to talk about that. But it really is a reflection on how many different areas that you would cover as a student, and how interrelated a musculoskeletal presentation will be, but intertwined with past medical history, cardio, all those things. And that's suddenly something you do as an osteopath in training. And it's just nice. It's just interesting to hear that from a different perspective.
Thank you.
And one of the things that you've developed that I saw happening recently was that you're now offering this membership-based platform. I wonder if you can tell me a bit more about that and what that entails.
Thank you very much. Would be delighted to. So we, as you alluded to earlier, we still do educational sessions for free. But otherwise, if people want to watch any of our paid webinars, then in the past, they will have registered and paid for that individual webinar, which might come with a 7-day replay, for example. But more and more people were saying to us a couple of things. Number one, they wanted to access things from before. They wanted to access things that we had done last year, things that we had done 6 months ago, because they may not have been familiar with clinical physio at that time, or they may not have known about it. The other thing that they were saying is they were asking us, is there any way that we could group all of this together in one subscription bundle? And so we have for so long thought about, how can we do this? This is what people want from us, but how can we actually deliver it in a way that is going to be good enough to qualify for a subscription that we can, again, genuinely offer for people with value? So we came up with a membership platform. So within our membership platform, if someone wants to get a clinical physio membership, the premium clinical physio membership, for example, allows them to access on a monthly subscription basis all of the live webinars that we will continue to do in the future, as well as all the webinars that we have done in the past. And all those webinars that we have done in the past, they can watch any day, anytime, because they are on demand, as we would say. And then when they watch a live webinar, we then convert that the very next day to an on-demand webinar, so that, again, they've got that stored in the future, so that if they want to come back to it anytime they can, rather than just having a 7-day replay. So that's how the webinars fit in. We offer things on the side of that, like we've started a clinical physio podcast, similar to the great podcast that you do, Sylvan, whereby the episodes are aiming to just, I suppose, catch things around the edges, like osteopathy, for example, a great topic that lots of physios don't know as much about, and other things as well, like some written articles, etc., etc. But I suppose that the nuts and bolts of it, the key thing is that we realized that people wanted everything under one roof. They wanted a one-stop shop for everything that they needed, and they were hoping for that on a subscription basis. So we were very grateful and very proud to be able to bring that, because it was something that people have been asking us for a long time. So therefore, it's all at member.clinicalphysio.com, no www, just member.clinicalphysio.com, and that's how people can find out about the membership if they were interested.
And I'll certainly put a link in the description box below so people can find that easily. And I
That's
will
very
just say
kind.
this has not been endorsed by you or anything.
Oh,
I
bless you.
still I still pay for occasionally on the occasional webinar that I'm interested in. In fact, I listened to one, I think last week that you had on neuromuscular conditions, and that was great. So just so people don't think I'm like getting like the Netflix equivalent for students for free or anything.
No, and once again, that's so kind of you, Sylvan. We really appreciate your support, and I think it's really opened our eyes that someone in a different field altogether, like osteopathy, has been able to benefit. So yeah, thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it.
I mean, you're the ones doing all the hard work. I just sit there with my notepad and a couple of snacks, and that's the great thing about it and I really do like the ability that you have that 7 day replay, because often there are
Yeah.
times where I'm not able to get to it at a certain time on that day because of work or other commitments, and it's just been nice to know it's like, okay, I don't have to rush home, or I can stop and start it whenever I want and just make notes and review things, and that's been such a revelation in a way, and it really does feel like Netflix for students in a way. Um,
That's very kind. That's what we tried. That's what we're trying to do, I suppose.
yeah, and one of the things that you do really well is social media. I mean,
Oh,
I
sure.
followed you on Instagram, and I'm still convinced you need to get on TikTok. I don't know if you are already.
We've
Um,
got do you know what? We've got a couple of TikTok videos, but I'm just trying to find the account now. It's by far not as frequent as our Instagram account is.
that's
Are
so
you on
all.
TikTok?
I am on
Oh,
TikTok.
how did I not know?
I don't think it's kind of like the content that the kids are looking for on TikTok. It tends to be little episodes of the podcast on there.
Cool.
So there's no like, I don't know, Megan Stallion dance stuff or anything
Sure,
like that.
sure.
I'm gonna get slated for saying Megan Lee Stallion wrong now. Um, but one of the things that you do really well on Instagram is things like you update it pretty regularly, but you include things like links to what you're looking at, papers. You even do like little quizzes, which are always fun because sometimes I get them wrong. And then I think Carl is probably looking at this like, you should know better.
Oh,
um,
not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
so how do you manage, because it sounds like it's a pretty big endeavor, just clinical physio alone with life and work, and so like, how do you manage all of those different things whilst maintaining a regular life?
Sure, that's very kind, Silver. I hope I can give some ideas here that can be equatable to anyone, rather than just to people who are trying to build a platform or something. So the one of the key things I learned is to try not to multitask. When our brains are challenged to do multitasking, they have to switch off one light and switch on another light frequently. And so you end up switching on. So you try and switch on a quarter of that light, a quarter of that light, a quarter of that light, and a quarter of that light. And that doesn't make it brighter. That just makes four lights, which are a quarter bright. And I think it's the same thing with relation to tasks that you're doing during the day. So if you're trying to revise some anatomy, and at the same time you're watching Netflix, and at the same time you're having your lunch, and at the same time you're texting your friend who's asking what you're going to do on the weekend, our brain is not good enough at doing all those four things at once. And so we tend to get less quality and less stuff done. So one task is try not to multitask, try and focus on one task until you complete it, or set a deadline in terms of time for how long you're going to focus on that task. And when you've hit that deadline, either reevaluate, do I need to spend another 10 minutes or do I need to move on to something else, and put that to one side? Because there are obviously some things that will need ongoing attention that you won't be able to finish in that time frame. I think the other thing, I'm a real list person. I tend to really like having lists of things that I need to do. If you do have a list, start with the thing that's most important on that list, get it done, because if it's the only thing you do that day, at least it's the most important thing you do that day. So if you're an osteopathy student and you need to revise some anatomy, but you also need to revise something on the hip in terms of some of the treatments that you might give, but the anatomy is more important to you, at least if you get that done, then you can tick that box off, and it makes life easier for you. And then I think that it's a real lesson in bringing other people in when you feel that you can't do it yourself. So, definitely in terms of us, if I was trying to produce a webinar on something like neurology, that you mentioned, the neuromuscular conditions webinar that our team member Liv created last week, it probably took her 2 days to write the presentation. It probably would have taken me 2 months to write the presentation, because her level of knowledge and understanding is so much better than mine. And if that means you're an osteopathy student and you're thinking, well, how can I revise 3 topics at once? Is there the opportunity for you to find 2 other friends who are equally motivated, equally passionate about learning? Could you get together in a group? Could you ask each of you to prepare a little mini presentation on each of those topics? But as a result, you all benefit from learning from it. So again, I suppose it's an idea on working out, if you can't do something alone, is there a way that you can you can get the help of other people in order to make it better, rather than keep pushing on yourself and it turns into something of lower quality. So hopefully those are a couple of tips that everyone can use.
Absolutely. And you talked about sort of like multitasking, really honing in and focusing on one thing. I wonder, I know it's been a while since you were a student.
Yeah, sure.
Because you graduated back, what, in 2008
That's
or
it.
so?
That's it. Yeah.
Was there anything that you did as a student, apart from the things that you've already talked about, that really helped get you through your degree?
Sure. What helped? I think practical sessions helped a lot, particularly with osteopathy. There's going to be a lot of practical sessions which are going to be really important. And sometimes we would ask some of our lecturers, is there a room free that we could just borrow it for an hour just to go and practice some stuff that we learned last week? I think that was really, really useful. Within relation to anatomy, I was the guy who had created these mini posters of the foot or the knee or the shoulder and put them up on my wall, because I think I was quite a visual person. But I think that the great thing in 2021, 2022 compared to 2008 is that there are a lot more digital resources that we can all access much more easily. Just like your stuff, Sylvan, the fact that people are able to access an osteopathy specific podcast resource is something that they probably wouldn't have been able to do with as much ease back in 2008. So if you find that you're a visual learner, go for the video learning. If you find that you're an audio person, go for the audio learning. If you feel that you're someone who benefits from learning with others, then could all of you sit down and watch that video together and get an understanding of it together? Those are perhaps some ideas that I hope can help some osteopathy students who are listening.
And I'm so glad you said, go and practice.
Sure. Yeah.
Practice and keep practicing, because it's
Yeah.
something that I talk about.
I was going to say, it must be something that you talk about with your students.
It is. I mean, sometimes, it works, and sometimes it might fall on deaf ears, and that's okay. And I get that, like we're all busy and everything, but I'm so glad you reiterated it as well. Even coming from like a different background, because it is that because a lot of what we do is practically based.
Definitely.
And so, putting your hands on people or talking to people and doing the actual technique is one of the foundations of what we both do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I wonder then, with you mentioned sort of doing more in-person courses coming up next year. Where do you see clinical physio going?
Sure. I think one thing that's really incredibly interesting is that before 2020, I would imagine that if I put a poll out to say to physio students, osteopathy students, qualified physios, qualified osteopaths, what do you prefer, online learning or face-to-face learning? If I was to imagine, I imagine it would be something in the region of 15% online, 85% face-to-face. Whereas now we've really seen people grow into online learning because of the fact that they can do it from home. If they have children, they can still manage all of that with children. If there's a replay involved, they can watch it again. And of course, the fact that they can more easily manage their life around them. They don't have to travel to go to the course. They don't have to wait until the course comes to London. So there's so many reasons that online learning has become so important. So we will definitely be continuing with online, as well as doing individual webinars that might be an hour and a half or 2 hours on a specific topic. We're also going to be focusing on more specialist courses, which are online courses that might be 6, 7, 8 hours on that particular topic, so that as if someone was going to a face-to-face course, they would still be able to get the same level of detail on that topic. But I personally, and I'm sure you as well as an educator yourself, Sylvan, there's still something about face-to-face teaching that I think really clicks with me, not only because I hugely enjoy it, but I also do get to see the look on people's faces when they say, "Oh, I get it now. That makes sense." And I think that's something that I would miss incredibly if I didn't do back to. And plus, we've made so many friends over the last 18 months that we've not actually been able to meet. Even like yourself, that we have not actually been able to meet properly. So that to be able to go out face to face and to meet all those people that have been a part of the clinical physio journey, would be very grateful and very humbled. So I think that we definitely look to do both. We definitely need to do more on some anatomy resources, and we've got an anatomy model that we use, and we need to get more out of that. So we're going to create an anatomy specific resource, hopefully coming out very soon. And I think those are some of the key things on the horizon. Still a lot of work to do, but we're grateful that we're in a position to be able to do that.
I love it. And you really hit the nail on the head there, whereby, the online stuff is great and it's so easily accessible and flexible. But there is something about being in the same room as people, not because we're probably all touched out because of the pandemic, but because there is that interaction that you might not otherwise get. And that's one of the things, not just you, but all your team members do really well, because essentially it's just you talking into a camera or a mic, and you've got a chat option, and I've seen that quite often. You always have a chat option for people to ask questions and things like that. And so you do sort of have like a couple people there answering questions, which is always great. But there is something about seeing people and seeing their reactions.
Yeah, definitely. You're so right. There's when I started doing the courses before COVID hit, and they were face-to-face courses, and we were going to this university and that university, etc., etc. I don't think you quite imagine or process just how enjoyable it will be until you get there. And I think if you spoke to me in 2008 and you said to me, the thing that you're going to enjoy the most in 2019, 2020, 2021 is doing face-to-face teaching with people, I'd say, really? I thought it was that I would have enjoyed working with a football team or something like that. And so I suppose the advice there is that things change over time. But now when I was most recently going on courses, and I've been lucky that I've been able to do some teaching recently, even within this COVID era, it's so enjoyable. And hopefully the advice there for any osteopaths listening can be that whatever you find yourself doing right now, there still may well be loads of room to grow. You may find yourself like Sylvan and say, do you know what? I really enjoy creating this online platform. I'm going to do that. Or I really enjoy teaching, so I'm going to see if I can get an opportunity to do that more. There's so much out there for all of us. So do what you can to make the best of it.
Absolutely. And explore every opportunity, because these opportunities come up. And sometimes you just need to take the leap. I mean, I wouldn't have imagined myself teaching this soon.
Sure.
When that opportunity came, I was like, okay, sure, let's do it. And then thankfully, I enjoy it. And it's something that I can do continuously. And during sort of the pandemic, I can still do that. So one of the things you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to come back to, was, you had a lot of physio students specifically asking you to cover certain things and certain topics. Do you think that it was something, do you think there were topics that weren't necessarily covered in a lot of depth during training, or is it something that you tend to do very quickly, you forget because you've got 3 other modules and an exam next week coming in?
I think you've probably got the right answer with both of those. I think that especially within, I wonder if it's the same with osteopathy, but within physiotherapy, learning it as a degree course or as a master's course, there is so much to learn in a really short period of time. And I think particularly during COVID, students weren't being able to go out on placement in order to connect the theory with what actually happens in practice. And so with the team being more clinical based, it allowed us to perhaps bring in a little bit of that clinical element into the teaching, which I think was useful. But I think the other side of things, as you correctly pointed to, that before COVID, we never had online learning. And so universities and educators didn't necessarily have that store of information that people could come back to, because they would do a lecture, they would take the, they take the slides or they take their notes, and what they were effectively going home with was just their understanding of that session without necessarily having the actual teaching from that session. And so I suppose that if students didn't necessarily have recorded lectures, for example, or if they didn't necessarily have a resource that gave them all of those things, that's the kind of thing we were finding. So again, I think if it comes back to anyone watching who's looking for some advice, trying to relate it back to what your audience wants, whether that be a patient or whether that be a group of people that you're trying to teach, can be really helpful. Speak to your audience, speak to your patients, speak to your followers, whoever they might be, because they may well give you some ideas that could really work for you.
Absolutely. I've just so enjoyed being able to have this opportunity to finally talk to you face to face, but talk to you interactively, which has been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
And I will say, yes, the audience that I tend to talk to is mainly osteopathic based, and a lot of students as well. But I will say that this, even though it's Clinical Physio as a company, as a web-based learning platform, I think most, if not all, of the content that you cover is still applicable to osteopaths. So if there is anyone listening there or watching us, do have a look, because I still use your resources. I have to say, your handbooks are so well done. I kind of want to steal some of your graphics in a way, because they're just that well done. I kind of want to see who does them for you, actually.
Don't worry, I'll chat to you afterwards about it. But that's very kind. And if we can help anyone, even if it's, we're totally okay with the fact that free might be the best option for people. And if so, Instagram's obviously completely free, and we still run free webinars. So more than happy to help. But at the same time, let me take this opportunity to say thank you so much for bringing us on, because you do see names and you do recognize names because you see it on the chat, or you see it on the webinar list or whatever. And I certainly recognize the name Silvates Dasani. So thank you. We're very grateful to be able to come on and speak to you.
Thanks. And just so people know, where can they find you on your website, social media, and so forth?
Thank you. That's very kind. So Instagram at Clinical Physio, YouTube, just search Clinical Physio and all of our stuff will come up. Our website is www.clinicalphysio.com. And on the homepage, there will be a link to the membership, if the membership is what you're interested for. But otherwise, if you just go to member.clinicalphysio.com, no www, just member.clinicalphysio.com, that will take you direct to the membership site if you wanted to check all that stuff out. And once again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak to you too.
Thank you so much. And I'll put all of that down so that people can access that really easily. But thank you so much for your time.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having us on, Sylvan.
Thanks.